Your Retirement Playbook, ideas and instructions. You know, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, or so they tell me. I've never tried. But when it comes to retirement, or what we call your life after work, there are many different ways to get it done, but there are some basic instructions, some just concepts that we believe you ought to follow. We're going to talk about that on Your Retirement Playbook today. When you come in and you see a fiduciary financial advisor, they're going to ask for some things, and it may seem sometimes overwhelming and quite frankly, unnecessary. I've had people in my years come in and say, Joe, I just don't show my tax return to anyone. Well, I get that. I understand that. The problem is I can't do my job without it. And I'm going to tell you a story you may or may not be aware of. It depends on your demographic. I'm 55. If you're near my age, you probably know of a guy or a gentleman by the name of David Lee Roth. And he was a musician that was very, very famous per the media. Not only was Van Halen very famous and great in the 80s, it was in 1985, it was the last song we played at our prom, and everything else I believe was called Jump. But the point is that David Lee Roth created a contract for people when they set up a concert for him, a stage for him, if you will. He had this very, very thick manual, a contract. And inside of that manual, buried in the middle of it, there was a rule that said in the green room, there can be no brown M&Ms. Now, the media got a hold of this and said that this was just a spoiled rich kid, arrogant, who would think about doing that, blah, 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 blah. He'd even put in the contract, if failure to perform any of these tasks results in me still getting paid and not having to do the contract. Now, at first glance, you may look at that and go, this was overkill, ridiculous, a brown M&M for goodness sakes. Well, here's the deal. In that year, they performed over 150 concerts. And unlike most shows, they had 6 semis of trucks and lights and everything else. He'd already seen peers, people that are in the music industry that year, catch on fire. Michael Jackson, I believe, was one of them. Right? And he knew if something wasn't wired correctly that he was putting his band, himself, and everybody else in jeopardy. And so they had very, very detailed figures about how electric boxes needed to be wired and things that need to be thought about. Not options, instructions. This is the way this is the amount of amperage. This is the amount of voltage. This is the amount of stuff that I need to be able to plug in. It was very well thought out. Now, at first glance, it's like, that's not necessary. That's not needed. This guy's a jerk, right? And it's really easy to get that until you get the rest of the information, the rest of the decision behind the story. And what David Lee Roth knew was if you didn't take out the brown M&Ms, which took no time at all, you certainly weren't going to wire the third jack box for plugging in to the right amperage that they needed for a certain guitar and a certain amp that they wanted in that spot. It really made all the sense in the world, but out of context, it didn't sound right. So when you call a financial advisor who's truly a fiduciary and they ask for things, there's reasons to get them. And keep in mind, I believe we all have a fiduciary. Just most of the time, it's the man in the mirror. Right? Most of the time, you're either doing this on your own, you've got your own 401k, you've got a broker who gets paid commissions, or you're working with somebody at a wirehouse who may charge you a fee, but it's somebody else that's managing the money. They're acting as a registered investment advisor licensee as opposed to actually managing the money internally and understanding what's going on. I believe most people have that fiduciary in the mirror. It's you, yourself, and you. Right? And when you're looking at it as a fiduciary, my job, if I were taking care of you, was to treat your money as if it were mine and we were in the same situation. In order for me to make decisions, I need certain ideas, certain things that have to be real and legitimate and concrete to be able to make the best decision for you. Part of that is your tax return. If you are dealing with somebody, and ladies and gentlemen, this includes you, if you're doing this on your own, if you're making financial decisions and you're not looking through the lens of your own tax return, you ought to consider either hiring somebody to help you and firing yourself, or at least creating a collaborative effort with somebody who understands how to do tax planning along with retirement planning. Remember, I didn't say tax reporting. I'm not talking about your CPA who does it when they do the taxes. This is something you got to do before year end. And we've got a lot of great CPAs we work with that work with us at the Financial Enhancement Group that do tax planning. But most of them don't have it in their system. They do tax reporting. The year has come to an end, and then they put the data in. What we want to do is create the story, give them the data that goes in so that when they do the tax reporting, they get it correct, whether that's Huth Thompson and Lafayette or E-Step Doctor and Company and Anderson and Muncie. Regardless of where that is, we want to make sure that it is thought out. So tax returns. What is your Social Security statement? Now, you may already say, well, Joe, I've already made the decision when I'm taking Social Security. Well, great. Congratulations. I'm glad you've moved something off the table. But if you're going to work with a fiduciary, we want to look at your entire operation to be able to see what you have financially, because our real interest is not in any individual stock. It's not in any individual savings plan. It's not in any individual thing at all. It's you and your family and your financial journey and getting you from A to Z, understanding all of the steps that are going to occur along the way, right? So it may seem and it may not make sense to you that brown M&Ms needed to be removed from the bowl, but it made sure that people were able to focus on and commit to a process of success, both for the venue and for David Lee Roth and Van Halen, and making sure that everybody was safe. When we ask for stuff, we need it to be able to make the most appropriate decision possible for you to say, hey, if I were you and it was my money and I were in a similar situation, this is what I would do. And that's exactly what we provide for people in a next steps meeting at the Financial Enhancement Group for people just like yourself, just like you. We sit down, we have that conversation, but we have to have the right data. So what are some instructions and some ideas for your retirement playbook? The first one, and this is a toughie for me, the first one is you really have to figure out your retirement budget. And I've done a lot of videos and a lot of radio shows on this over the years, but now that I'm 55, in theory, that period of time is getting closer. Now, I have no intentions of retiring, or I wouldn't be standing here doing this radio show or podcast, depending on how you're getting it. I love what I do. I love teaching this financial stuff, and I'll do it as long as God allows me. But I still have to recognize I'm closer to the end than I am the beginning, right? There's just no way around that. 35 years have passed, and I've got younger people that I'm training and bringing into the industry all of the time. And by the way, if you know somebody who wants to be in this industry, who's already in the industry, you can have them give us a call at 800-928-4001. I'm always open-minded enough to at least listen to why somebody belongs on our team if they want to be in the financial services industry. So when you're looking at that data, that first thing that you have to really start with is how much income, not assets, how much income do you need to maintain your standard of living when you go to separate from the workforce? Notice I didn't say retire. I call it your life after work. But it's when you leave that primary occupation, how much money do you really need to have? How much income do you need to have to maintain your standard of living? And we really watch people do three different things. We watch people who separate from the workforce and find something else to do that's equal to or greater than what they already made before. Doesn't happen a lot, but I would say 10 to 15% of the time. Sometimes they take 3 months off. Sometimes they take 6 months off. Many times they are decided to build a business, which gives us a lot of opportunities and options. The second one is they separate from the workforce, find something else to do. They're no longer able to save as much as they were saving, but they're able to let what they had continue to grow, or they're able to live off of a defined benefit plan, a pension plan, or some other rental income, some other form of income without having to touch their investments. And then the third is full-on distribution. Here's what you've accumulated. Here's how much income you need. So question number one that we have to know, that you have to know if you're doing this on your own, is how much income do you have to really have to be able to maintain that standard of living? Now, we're going to talk to you about it in terms of phases, but we're also going to talk to you in terms of a retirement budget, right? So when you have to support your standard of living and you're no longer engaged in work, You may have never had a budget before in your life. It's about 50-50 of those of you watching this show or listening have a financial budget at all. It really is about half and half. But when we go to separate from the workforce, we really need to have one. I haven't had a household budget since I had more month than I had money. We've always had a business budget because that's how you run a business. Not all of them, but that's how we run our business, where there is a financial budget that's put into place. We need to have one of those for retirement, though, that says, okay, I need $8,000 a month. Here's what that's what I need to replace my standard of living. That's what somebody says I go through on a monthly basis, or it's $6,000 or it's $12,000. What the number is less meaningful than knowing the number. Then we help people in that retirement budget define it into categories, what we call social expenses and fixed expenses. And that's really going to be critical. So your first assignment for your next steps meeting right now is to make sure that you're able to gather the documents that I would need to be able to make a financial decision for you, so that if you're doing it on your own, you know what documents need to be in front of you to be able to make that decision for yourself. You need to write out risk and volatility, fees and expenses, taxes today and tomorrow, and real return, the fiduciary focus, and say, okay, what am I thinking about in each of these categories based on each financial decision that I'm making? And understand that it's a trade-off. It's not, do I cancel this life insurance policy or keep it? It's the trade-off. What can I do with the money if I get rid of it? What happens if I don't have it? There are 5 or 6 different options that go into play there. If you want to make it easy, just call us at 800-928-4001 or go to yourlifeafterwork.com. Get signed up for a next steps meeting. You did the heavy lifting. Let us do our job. Let us do our turn. We'll take care of you and sit down and give you things you really, really do want to consider.